If you've ever found yourself thinking, is he a narcissist? Something just feels off here. You are not alone. Let's talk about some signs that are worth paying attention to. Because you're not asking that question for no reason. You're asking it because something isn't adding up about your relationship. Your body says something is wrong, even if you can't pinpoint exactly what it is yet. And interestingly, the first red flag you're usually consciously aware of in a toxic relationship isn't even their behavior, it's changes in your thinking. So, as humans, we have an innate desire for our thoughts, our emotions, values, and behaviors to align. We want our reality to make sense. So, for example, when you're married, you expect to be able to rely on your spouse. You expect honesty, loyalty, kindness. So, when you're married and your spouse is disloyal, dishonest, unkind, something inside of you feels deeply unsettled. That anxiety that you feel when your expectations don't match your reality is called cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is what happens when two opposing truths collide in your mind. So I'm married to someone who loves me, and I'm married to someone who treats me poorly. Those two realities don't fit together. And because that mismatch is uncomfortable, your brain tries to fix it. So instead of saying, I'm married to someone and they're abusive, your mind softens it or tries to find some kind of workaround. I'm married to someone who's critical of me, but they don't really mean it. I'm married to somebody who yells at me, but they just have a really stressful job. You start justifying or explaining or rationalizing because it feels safer to adjust your perception than to face the possibility that something could be deeply wrong here. So instead of blaming them, looking at their behavior, you try harder. You try communicating more clearly or differently. You ask for less. You become more patient. You try couples therapy. You work on yourself. And then when nothing gets better, narcissistic individuals will often use your quote failed attempts to make things better as proof that you're the problem. So they'll say things like, well, if you communicated better, I wouldn't react like this. If you weren't so sensitive, this wouldn't even be an issue. If you could just be more supportive, then we'd be fine. So your brain is living on this treadmill, trying to make sense of things. You replay conversations. You think about over and over what was said and trying desperately to understand them. What do they mean by that? How could I have said that differently? Why can't we make this work? And if you're somebody who already tends to be an overthinker or live in your head, this relationship will amplify that ruminative voice even more. And while your mind is racing, trying to make sense of things, your emotion follow the chaos in your mind as you start to feel more and more confused. So while your mind is racing, trying to make sense of things in your body, in your emotions, you start to notice the feeling of confusion more and more and more. And you can think of confusion as the emotional side of the cognitive dissonance coin. Your mind is racing, analyzing, dissecting, trying to make sense of things, but emotionally, you feel very disoriented. And a huge sign you're in a toxic dynamic is that you leave conversations feeling more confused than when you started them. Nothing ever fully adds up. The same issues get recycled, the same lies get told, the same promises get broken. And then, despite how much you're doing to try to save this relationship, try to make it better, you feel a ton of guilt. Guilt becomes the air you breathe in narcissistic relationships because narcissists consistently push blame onto you. They make these unrelated connections to make you feel responsible for things you literally can't control. Well, let's say, for example, you couldn't get off work to take them to the doctor at the exact time they wanted, so now you're the reason they're still sick. You manage the family budget, but they overspend, but somehow it's still your fault the family can't afford a vacation. You have a standing meeting every Wednesday at 6 p.m., yet somehow they have a crisis every Wednesday at 5:59, and they still expect you to be there for them like you have nothing else going on. So over time, maybe you stop sharing important events with them until the last minute so that they don't have time to sabotage these things. And then they accuse you of being inconsiderate and selfish for not telling them sooner. And if you don't understand what's happening, that you're dealing with a narcissist, then you start taking that on and you do start wondering, well, maybe I should have handled that differently. Maybe I should have told them earlier. Maybe this one is on me, even when it doesn't make logical sense. And so you feel guilty for seeing them as abusive. You feel guilty for pulling back. You feel guilty for supposedly somehow not being enough, as they always say you're not enough. You wonder, am I being mean? Am I expecting too much? You feel especially guilty on the good days, when they're playing with the kids, when they're providing for the family, when they're being charming. Those are the times when you really think, well, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am being too sensitive. They're actually a good person. Look at how they're playing with the kids. Look at how much they provide for us. What's wrong with me for even thinking this about my spouse or partner or parent? And because narcissistic individuals don't take responsibility for their part in anything, your attempts to improve the relationship get twisted into further quote unquote proof that you're the issue. So you live in this constant low grade guilt, even when you're not sure what you did wrong. And then there often comes a lot of shame in these relationships too, because no matter what you do, it's never enough. And if you don't yet recognize you're dealing with a narcissist, you believe there is a solution. We can make this relationship better. You just haven't found that solution yet, but you believe it's possible. So you try harder, you do more, you give more, you ask for less. And when nothing changes, you conclude, yeah, it's because I'm not good enough. And over time, living in this kind of dynamic, you can begin to experience symptoms that look a lot like depression, hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness. You might even move into a freeze response, where this is what happens when you can't fight your way out of it. Like, you can't discuss things over and over again enough that it makes sense or that it gets better, and you can't get away from it. Maybe this is somebody that you have to deal with. You're married to, they're in your family, they're in your workplace. And so then we go into freeze mode. Your nervous system disconnects. You feel numb, you feel apathetic, like you're going through the motions, but you're not fully present. Because when you're in an environment where you're not allowed to have your own feelings, eventually you decide the safest thing for you to do is to not have them. You detach from your feelings, you detach from your own needs because you know they're not going to be met. And over time, you struggle to even identify what you think, what you feel, what you need, because you've practiced for so long detaching from them. And that's when people start saying, well, I don't even know who I am anymore. This is where your behavior also starts to change too, even though it can be subtle. You might notice that you're less productive. Maybe you procrastinate more. But it's not because you're lazy. It's not because anything is wrong with you. It's because in narcissistic relationships, you're either dealing with a conflict, preparing for a conflict, or trying to make sense of a conflict that just happened. And that level of chronic stress really drains your emotional bandwidth. So you have these thoughts like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just do what I need to do? But you're living in such a high stress environment. Your body's on edge. You're hypervigilant. And on the flip side of that, some people actually just stay constantly in motion. So you stay in that flight mode. You might find that you can't sit still. You're always doing something. And even when you are sitting still, you're not really resting. Like, your mind is still going and you're still judging yourself for all the things that you think you should be doing. And it's this frenetic, anxiety-driven behavior that keeps you in motion. It's not calm and grounded and intentional. So most of your energy in a narcissistic relationship is flowing toward the narcissist. They become like this vortex black hole where you're investing everything in them. You're helping them solve problems. You're listening to their complaints. You're trying to anticipate their moods and their needs, which leaves very little, if any, energy to plan, create, imagine, pursue your own goals. You might notice that you start to withdraw. You'll pull back from family and friends, partly because you feel ashamed for having these relationship struggles, partly because you don't even know how to explain what's happening in your relationship. Maybe you feel very alone and isolated because maybe everyone else thinks your spouse or your parent or whoever is amazing. Your husband is so great. You guys are so good together. It must be so amazing to have grown up with a mom or dad like that. So you start wondering, why is it just me? Why does everyone else think they're amazing, but I have all these issues with them? Which tends to lead to more confusion, more self-blame, more self-doubt, and then doubling down even harder on trying to make things work for them. And while all this is going on internally for you, narcissists isolate you In a very practical sense, they control your time. They always have chaos around them. They make impulsive financial decisions that create chaos and put more tension on you. They lose important documents that you need on the way to the airport. They interrupt your routine. They're chronically late. They ignore your boundaries around schedule. So you literally end up running from one crisis to the next. And slowly, because of that, your world gets smaller as you try harder to meet their needs, to manage all the chaos that's going on, and to make sense of what you're experiencing. So if you're watching or listening to this and you've been thinking, oh, this feels familiar, I want to invite you to ask yourself an even deeper question than, is he a narcissist? I want you to ask yourself, who am I becoming in this relationship? Are you more grounded or confused? Are you feeling more empowered or more guilty and shameful? Are you stepping into more of who you are or feeling more like a shell of a person? Because your body is an amazing feedback system. It's letting you know when you feel happy and secure or anxious and confused. Our body is constantly giving you feedback based on how you feel in the environment or in the relationships that you're in. One of the quickest ways to identify toxic behaviors in others is to notice how you feel, because you are a walking computer. Your brain and your body are taking in more information than you can even imagine, quickly processing it and providing you signals through physical sensations that we experience as emotions. So staying mindful of your emotional states can actually mean the difference between staying away from or disengaging from and getting sucked into a narcissistic relationship. If this episode really resonated with you and you want an even deeper understanding of the psychological patterns behind narcissistic behavior, I invite you to watch my free masterclass, The Narcissist Playbook, because in this training, I teach you how to identify manipulation tactics, understand why narcissists behave the way they do, and really learn practical strategies to protect yourself emotionally so you can stop getting caught in those same cycles over and over. You can access it for free using the link in the description. Until next time, remember that no matter where you are in your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we're going to keep building it together. So I will see you in the next episode.